lot of debating going on about that. We'll join that particular convo. Is J.R. Smith joining the PGA? No. But he is petitioning to play golf in college, so we'll have those details. Does this look comfortable? Of course it doesn't. So sit down instead and enjoy a full hour of The Jump right now.
It's sunny.
Welcome to The Jump. I'm George Sedano in for Rachel Nichols today, joined by two dynamic basketball minds, the legendary Hall of Famer Jackie McMullen and worldwide Momo Ramona Shelburne, ESPN NBA insider. So, ladies, we have some very spicy topics to get into today, and we'll start right here in Los Angeles, where Momo and I are. So, according to our very own Zach Lowe, numerous general managers and coaches from around the league say that they would draft one LeBron Raymond James 1 in a winner-take-all game. By the way, LeBron is 36 years old, coming off a year where he averaged 25 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, and 7.8 assists per game last season. So, Ramona, I'll start with you. If you had your top overall pick in a winner-take-all game, basically the storyline of Space Jam, which we saw LeBron in, who would you take?
LeBron. LeBron, until he falls off the mountain as the king, I'm going with him. I know last year he was hurt, but we still saw probably 70% LeBron James in that play-in game against Steph Curry win the game. I mean, look at the shot right over Steph. There it is, winner take all.
Yep.
I mean, you don't choose LeBron just because of how good he is individually. You choose him because of how good he makes his teammates and how well he sees the game. Kevin Durant is right there, so close, right one level below, but I guess maybe just the length of his shoe. Well,
oh, wow.
The length of his shoe behind LeBron?
That's too soon, I think, still. Too soon still. Jackie, what do you think?
Wow, yeah. Wow, a lot of LA love going around on this panel today, Momo. And listen, if someone said to me, we just drew straws, you got LeBron, I wouldn't be unhappy. I would like my chances for all the reasons Ramona just stated. But if you're telling me about one game at this moment, on this day, give me Kevin Durant, who I do not believe is a notch below and just proved it in Tokyo. He's also 3 or 4 years younger than LeBron and has a little more tools at this point of his career. He's in the prime of his career. He can kill you so many different ways on the offensive end with that size, with that quickness, with that three-point shooting. Give me Durant, but you know what? If you want to saddle me with LeBron, I'm good with it. Trust me.
You know what, Jackie? I'm with you. If I'm playing in a game against either one of you and one of you took Durant and I'm getting LeBron or vice versa, I'm good with that. Now, I do think I'm with Ramona here. If I had my druthers, if I had the #1 overall pick, I would still take LeBron because for as unbelievable as Kevin Durant is, and I think he's the best scorer in the NBA. We saw what he did in the Olympics. He dragged us across the finish line at the Olympics. I still think LeBron makes the guys around him a little more viable, right? I still think that he has a slight edge in that particular regard. So, slight edge to LeBron, but I'm good with either one.
If I need one bucket, I'll go with KD. If I need a game, I want LeBron.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that, for sure.
Fair.
All right, sticking with LeBron.
LA spin, people. LA spin. But continue.
All right, sticking with LeBron, he's got a new running mate in Russell Westbrook. I don't know if you've heard that already. The explosive point guard was traded to his hometown here in Los Angeles on last month, basically during the draft and whatnot here. So, let me ask you this. A lot of overhaul going on in LA, Ramona. Pretty much a complete turnaround from last year's roster after the exit to the Phoenix Suns. You cover the Lakers as closely as anyone. How does Russ fit with LeBron and AD?
So the Lakers' impetus for this move is they looked at their 2020 team and said, you know what we really missed as a secondary playmaker to LeBron, the guy like playoff Rondo. And I say playoff Rondo, not Rajon Rondo, because playoff Rondo is the version they have in their mind. Now, Russ actually does a lot more than playoff Rondo did. He can get up and down the court. He can create. He can score himself. He's not probably in the same category as a shooter, but They envision him as a guy that runs next to LeBron, can take a secondary playmaker. But, George, I actually think it reminds me a bit of how they set up the offense in Cleveland and in Miami when LeBron played with Kyrie Irving and LeBron played with Dwayne Wade, where essentially you have two secondary playmakers. The key is they have to see themselves as secondary playmakers. In any other team, Kyrie Irving, Dwayne Wade are primary playmakers. Russell Westbrook has been a primary playmaker in every team he's been on. And so I see visions of him being able to set the offense the way Rondo does, of him being able to create offense and take pressure off LeBron. But I think initially they're going to have to stagger his minutes while he learns how to play off the ball and be the quote-unquote secondary playmaker to LeBron.
All right, now welcome in our audience here on ESPN News, joining us here now. So, Jackie, how do you feel Russell fits with LeBron and AD?
Well, Ramona, you mentioned the past iterations of LeBron, and you mentioned Dwayne Wade and Kyrie Irving. Two very glaring differences between them and Russell Westbrook. Those guys can shoot, and Russell Westbrook cannot from the perimeter. And I think that's one of the problems with this deal. I would have gone with a spacer like Buddy Hield instead of Russ. But Russell Westbrook is...
Damian Lillard, it's Dame time. Take one.
There's Lillard again from the logo. What time is it?
It's Dame time.
All right, welcome back to The Jump. I'm George Sedano here with Jackie McMullen and Ramona Shelburne. Twitter's popping. Let's go. Speaking of the Blazers there, you saw Dame apparently just responded to a Twitter user who tweeted at him, how much y'all want to bet that before the NBA season starts, the Lakers still get Damian Lillard? Dame tweeted back, bet $1 million. Now listen, okay, I don't know, unless there's some new salary cap I'm not familiar with, I don't feel like that's even possible, but Ramona Shelburne, you know this league and the salary cap and this Lakers team as well as anyone. It seems like Dame is just messing with us here.
Yeah, you know, I actually kind of like that Dame's messing with us. It sort of reminds me of like when we get aggregated poorly and we snap back every once in a while. I think he's sort of tired of people just using him and his discussion for their own fun out there on Twitter. So it just felt like Dame was just cracking a joke.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get to Dame's new head coach, Chauncey Billups, who has some bold plans for Portland's offense. The Blazers' dynamic backcourt is known, obviously, for their three-point prowess. But Billups told Jay Allen of Rip City Radio, quote, I'm not one of those coaches that wants to shoot all threes and get up 50 threes. I don't believe in that. So, Jackie, I'll start with you. This seems like it could be interesting. Do you believe Chauncey's offensive philosophy, if that's the case, will work in Portland?
I do, because I think you could take this a whole bunch of ways, and here's how I take it. Portland was 29th in the league, George, in assists last year. Only the New York Knicks passed the ball around a little more. He wants more ball movement. That's what he should want. What Portland did last year is they were second in three-point attempts behind Utah. Where did it get them? He's not telling Dame Lillard, I guarantee you, hey, Dame, I want you to shoot less threes. That's not happening, okay? That's not what he's saying here. What he's saying here is let's penetrate and kick. I don't mind threes, but I don't want to live exclusively on them because we need better ball movement because what we did last year didn't work effectively or not. And you know what? He's right.
He said a lot of other things in that interview, too, mostly about their defense, which was 23rd in the league in allowing points in defense and 25th in opposing shooting percentage. That's where they need to get better. And if you're worried about your threes and how many you're taking, how many you're making, but you're not stopping anybody on the other end, that's where your problem is. And I think the other part that I thought he said that is really important for the Blazers, not just this year, but going forward in their future with Yusuf Nurkic, is that he thinks there's a lot more they can do with Nurkic and a lot more they can do with him in their offense. He's a great passing big. They can get him a lot more involved in their offense. And I think that's a point of emphasis for Chauncey. So the threes, if that's what you're hunting for, as Jackie pointed out, 29th in assists, that's not going to win you a lot of games. You also have to do it on the defensive end. And the big guy there who needs to get more involved, if you don't get him involved, he's not going to be happy.
Well, I've got good news for Dame and CJ. Can we bring that graphic back up on their three-point percentage and the amount of makes and the attempts and all that stuff? Well, he said 50, okay? Well, they averaged 41, basically. Ooh. So, you know what? Dame and CJ,
there you go.
To Jackie's point, you don't have to change very much of what you're going to do on offense. But I think Jackie made a great point, which is drive and kick. If you look at the teams that are most successful in the NBA and tend to win championships on offense, right? It's the teams that move the ball the most, right? It's the teams where your defense cannot set. Now, Ramona, you made an unbelievable point. Their defense... I mean, it was bad. I want to say, if I recall correctly, the Sacramento Kings had the worst defense in the history of the NBA last year. Portland, I think, finished in the top 5 all time as far as defense is concerned. Now, I may be wrong about that.
Last year's a bit of an outlier.
No, for sure. I get that. But it hasn't been good, and it has been trending to get worse over the years. And if there's one thing we know Chauncey's Mr. Big Shot. But those Detroit teams, Jackie, they could defend. There's no doubt about that.
Boy, could they. And there was a toughness to them, too.
And, George, Chauncey came from the Clippers. Clippers led the league in three-point shooting percentage last year.
Right.
So he's not averse to taking shots.
Right.
Taking those threes, just got to make them.
Yeah, we want to make sure. The reason we did this topic was so people don't take it out of context and be like, oh, Chauncey's this old school guy, doesn't want to shoot threes. We wanted to make sure everyone knows that's not exactly what Chauncey's saying here. So good luck to Chauncey there. But let's shift to the Eastern Conference. Brooklyn has signed Kevin Durant to a 4-year extension, as we heard and was reported previously. Nets general manager Sean Marks said Wednesday he's, quote, very confident that both James Harden and Kyrie Irving will be signed, sealed, and delivered before training camp starts. So, Ramona, the Nets have already given the bag to KD, but are you confident Kyrie and Harden will also sign their extension?
Yeah, I'm confident. I mean, initially, the impression I had was that all three of these guys were going to sign their extensions at the same time. There was going to be more of a show that all three of them were teaming up and signing extensions at the same time. But, summertime, people get busy. Kyrie left Rock Nation. He's got to sort out his representation. James has been traveling around Europe. I mean, it just seems like there's been other things going on with both Kyrie and with James.
He was with the baby, I believe, in Europe. There was a big picture that circulated around the internet with that. But Jackie, how about you? How do you feel about their potentials of signing the extension with Brooklyn?
Well, Sean Marks is a very, very careful man. He's been around the league a long time, obviously done a fantastic job in Brooklyn. There's no way on earth he would even suggest this if it wasn't going to happen. And because what we know of Kyrie, people projecting things on behalf of him, if there was even an inkling of a doubt, Sean Marks never would have said this. So I expect them all back. If you're James Harden, why would you even think twice about this? I would have signed it 4 weeks ago or whenever I was eligible. So, yeah, this will get done.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And the reality is this. They've teamed up for a reason, so why wouldn't you sign the extension? I mean, logic just says you guys made all this happen, you want it to come together, you see it through, and you give yourself a window to potentially reach your goal, which is to win a championship or maybe even multiple championships.
There's not a huge sense of urgency, though. Both those guys are under contract for a while, so it doesn't have to get done right now. My training camp would be better, though.
Okay. Well, there was a sense.
Just remember, it wasn't Harden, Durant, and Kyrie. It was Kyrie, Durant, and DeAndre Jordan. Harden joined the party late, so he wasn't part of that original pact.
Yeah, no doubt. So, speaking of timeliness and contracts, well, with Dennis Schroeder, it didn't go so great. He bet on himself and he lost. Schroeder spent one season in Los Angeles with the Lakers, turned down a 4-year, $84 million offer from Los Angeles in March to instead test free agency. Now, he's headed to Boston on a 1-year deal for $5.9 million, which is the taxpayer mid-level exception. So, Jackie, will Dennis Schroeder's free agency gamble serve as a cautionary tale for players moving forward?
So you would think it would, except for my experience with these players is they all have great positive self-talk. They all believe in themselves. That most of them are saying, well, that was him, man. That's not me. So I don't really think this will change any player's mind if he really believes in himself. And it's usually the agents that are trying to guide you through this process. So Dennis Schroeder, look, this was a miscalculation on his part. A lot of things went awry. I will say this on terms of the Celtics end of it. If you said to me the Celtics signed Schroeder to a 4-year, $70 million contract, I'd say that's a huge mistake. A 1-year, $5.9 million contract for a team that's super thin at the point? Are you kidding me? This fell right in their lap. This is maybe one of the best signings of the summer in terms of value for price.
Brad Stevens, Executive of the Year already. Look at that. He just got the job, and he's already headed that direction. Ramona, you've got some stuff on this here.
Well, look, with the Dennis Schroeder story is he comes to the Lakers. They went out and traded for him. Remember, they traded a first-round pick and Danny Green for Dennis Schroeder. They showed they wanted him. And the first thing he did in joining a championship team is say, I want to start. Wasn't a good start to get off. It wasn't a good start to his Laker tenure. I mean, the Lakers had just won a championship, so to come in and say, I want to start, when you haven't done anything in training camp or earned anything. That was a big proclamation. I think that was the start of when they realized this may not work out very well. And his best years in the NBA have been as a sixth man. That year in Oklahoma City where he finished second in the sixth man of the year voting, that's what made the Lakers want to go trade for him. They believed in him. They wanted him to do more. They gave him that latitude, said, okay, starting's important to you, then we're going to try to make that work. But not only did they go out and give him that offer that made him a really big offer, after they traded for Russell Westbrook, my understanding is they went and circled back around to him and talked with him about a shorter term deal, 1 year, sort of a softer offer for more money than he got with the Celtics, and he wasn't interested in that either. So it wasn't just the $84 million contract that extension he turned down during the year. There was a circling back with him afterwards. Ends up in Boston. Maybe that'll be a better fit, Jackie, because I think he has a bigger role there in Boston where he can rebuild his value.
That's it. It's just 1 year, right? So
yeah.
He has a chance to rebuild his value, and he has to be he has to do everything they ask of him so that people begin to look at him again as a guy that can be a good teammate and a guy that can fit on any team. So this is a win-win for the Celtics and Schroeder in my mind.
Well, listen, all I can say is this, all right? The money part, we've seen the reported stuff that he was in shock or whatnot. Look, I don't know if he's married or not, but Mrs. Sedano would have me sleeping out on the curb, okay, if I passed on $84 million. That's all I'm going to say. So if the bosses want to offer me $84 million, I will gladly take it. Or any team, whoever, anyone want to offer me that kind of money.
Rookie contract, so he's made some money at least.
All right, so coming up, there have been rumblings that Luka and Porzingis aren't necessarily great friends off the court, but can they work on the floor? Tim McMahon stops by to break it all down. That's coming up next. You're on The Jump.
Mainstream took a hold of my soul, but I made it back, bringing it back to the roots on some audacious that. I rhyme for the love of it. This right here is my covenant. Since I was a young and
Talking about Dennis Schroeder in the Lakers and ending up in Boston. Now, here's a former Laker who also played in Boston. The Lakers are considering the potential signing of Isaiah Thomas, according to Mark Stein. Jackie, you've been around IT. Do you expect him to be back in the NBA this season?
I would love for someone to give him a shot, George. I think he can still play. I think he can help teams. I think he's already taken his expectations and put them in the proper place, much the way Melo did before he had to come back in. I really hope someone gives him a spot.
I don't see him on the Lakers this year, but he did have a good run with the Lakers a couple of years ago, and people thought that wouldn't work either because they had a young team with Lonzo Ball, and he actually was really well liked by the coaching staff and the players on that team. Yeah,
and I also don't love the fit with LeBron. They tried that in Cleveland that one time too, and it didn't necessarily work out there either. So, I feel like IT has a place in the NBA, especially to your point, Jackie, if he's figured out that he can play a specific role. Welcome back to The Jump. I'm George Sedano, alongside Ramona Shelburne, alongside Hall of Famer Jack McMullen, and now Tim McMahon. If we're going to talk Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic, we're going to talk to Tim McMahon, Bam McMahon, as we like to call him around here. All right, Tuesday, Luka Doncic signed the landmark 5-year, $207 million Supermax rookie extension. The question now is, can Kristaps Porzingis and Luka Doncic work together on the floor? So, Tim, I'll start with you. What do we know about this relationship and where it's at this particular moment?
It's not like these guys were at war with each other by any stretch. Just it was awkward. There was a lack of interaction on the floor, off the floor. And I thought it was interesting in Luka's press conference in Slovenia the other day, he mentioned that he wants the Mavericks to have that same kind of chemistry that the Slovenian national team had. And look, that has to start with the Luka Porzingis dynamic. And a lot of that responsibility is on Luka Doncic's shoulders. You don't have to be best friends with the guy, but, have some dinners, play cards on the plane. And more than anything, Luka's going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to, dictate who's touching it, when they're touching it. Porzingis isn't expecting to be the man, but he doesn't want to be an afterthought. He can't go a fourth quarter without touching the ball, and that is in large part up to Luka to determine.
Well, look, the Mavericks are working on their relationship with Kristaps Porzingis. Jason Kidd, he's in Latvia right now with Porzingis, and the whole contingent, Dirk and Kidd and Mark Cuban, they were all in Slovenia to. With Luka Doncic when he signed his contract, but they just stayed over there to work on Porzingis because you have a talented player in this league, and right now, if it's not working out, you could trade him when his value is at an all-time low, but it's better to work on it and see if you can find a way to salvage this relationship, especially with a new coach, new front office. And I think they're putting a lot of attention to doing that right now.
But honestly, guys, I think one of the problems with this pairing isn't so much their friendship. It's just that Porzingis isn't himself. Now, I don't know if he can regain his form. I know he's had some injuries, but Tim, especially when I've watched him closely, the lack of mobility, particularly defensively. 2 years ago, we were talking about this guy as like a defensive of the year candidate. This past year, teams were shooting over 60% against him in the restricted areas. So you got problems if he can't return to some kind of form on the defensive end of the floor, never mind him scoring baskets and shooting threes and all the rest of it. So they got their work cut out of him. I just don't know if physically he's able to be the unicorn anymore. I have my doubts.
Yeah, he needs to be the guy who was playing defense for the Knicks several years ago. I don't think there's any question about that. And look, if he can play the 5, that unlocks so many things for them on both ends of the floor, but specifically on offense. So if he can handle his own defensively there, that changes the dynamic some. All right, let's move on here. Giannis is set to release a new biography titled Giannis, The Improbable Rise of an MVP. And in the book, Jason Kidd, the new head coach in Dallas, his coaching style was described as psychological warfare by a former Bucks player in the book. So, Tim, what do you expect his coaching style to be now in Dallas?
Well, one, this is a drastically different job than what he took over Milwaukee. The Milwaukee Bucks won 15 games the season before Jason Kidd took over there. That was a developmental job. It was a culture-changing job. And, you know, we can go incident by incident or situation by situation, but they jumped from 15 wins to 41 wins in his first season. I think the development he did with Giannis, with Middleton, you know, as Jared Dudley, who was on that team, just tweeted, that paid off, helped pave the way for them to develop into championship players. But this is not a developmental job with the Mavericks. He's taken over a playoff team. And so I think his approach will be different in Dallas than it was in Milwaukee. I also think one of the underrated members of the Mavericks staff, overlooked, I should say, Don Kalkstein, the team psychologist, has had a great relationship with Jason Kidd going back to his playing days, and he's going to be a critical part of what Jason Kidd does in Dallas moving forward.
Ramona?
Yeah, look, Jason Kidd ended up staying very close with Giannis. When Jason Kidd was fired from that job, Giannis actually called and tried to save him from being fired. So some of the stuff was hard to read. The book itself by Mir and Fade is a really good book. It's really interesting about Giannis's rise and all that. But the other takeaway that you have to look at it long term is that Jason and Giannis were good on the way out to the point where Giannis tried to save him from being fired. And they're still good. So some of the stuff is hard to read, admittedly, when you read some of the excerpts from that book. He clearly was trying to change the culture, and there was some stuff that I think is pretty borderline in terms of psychological warfare. But Jackie, you've covered the league for a long time. Some of the stories that come out of locker rooms that we hear about they don't always age well.
Right, and so here's the question. Did Jason Kidd learn anything from his experience in Milwaukee? Can he look back on it and say, here's what I'd like to do differently, here's what I need to do differently? And I've got to believe that the Dallas Mavericks and every other team that interviewed him were asking him these exact questions. This was, you know, a badly kept secret, the kind of stuff that went on in Milwaukee. Yeah. I will say this, every player you talk to about Jason Kidd, they speak about him with such reverence. And that's based a lot, I believe, on the way he played the game of basketball. He's obviously a Hall of Famer, and people have great respect for the way he played the game. Now, that doesn't always translate over into coaching. We've seen a lot of great players who have not been great coaches, but he's got another shot at it. So let's see what he does with it.
Yeah, and again, to your point, Jackie, we have to see if people can learn from those experiences and grow from them. All right.
That's right.
Ramona, thank you for hanging out. We appreciate you hanging out with us today. Tim and Jackie will stick around,
Ramona.
but coming up next, we'll discuss the best players we've seen at Summer League thus far. Keep it locked here on The Jump.